The old Honda Civic wheezed as it climbed another hill on Interstate 5. Maya pressed the gas pedal a little harder, but the car seemed to protest with every mile. The engine made sounds that worried her, and she could feel David tense up in the passenger seat every time it happened. "Think we'll make it?" David asked, trying to keep his voice light. But Maya could hear the concern underneath. They both knew this car had seen better days. "Much better days, we have to," Maya replied, adjusting the rearview mirror for the third time in 10 minutes. It was a nervous habit she'd picked up lately. Lisa's counting on us being there. The air conditioning had given up on them somewhere around Sacramento. Now they drove with all 4 windows down, hot California air whipping through the car like a hairdryer stuck on high. Maya's carefully styled hair for the wedding was already a lost cause, but she didn't care. Her sister's wedding was tomorrow, and nothing was going to stop them from being there. In the back seat, their wedding gifts shifted with every turn. They'd wrapped them carefully in paper Maya had bought with coupons. The toaster had cost them $47 at the discount store. It wasn't fancy, but it was what they could afford. The card tucked between the presents contained a check for $50. Maya had written and rewritten the amount 3 times, each time making it smaller. $50 was what they could spare. Barely. David rolled up his sleeve and stuck his arm out the window, trying to catch some relief from the heat. His work shirt was already damp with sweat. He'd insisted on wearing his only good shirt for the drive, even though Maya told him to wait until they got to the hotel. But David was like that. He wanted to look proper, even if proper was a relative term these days. "Remember when we used to complain about traffic jams?" David said, watching empty desert stretch out in front of them. "Now I'm just grateful when we're moving." Maya smiled despite everything. David always found a way to make light of their situation. It was one of the things she loved about him. Even when money was so tight, she sometimes lay awake at night doing math in her head. Bills minus income, income minus bills. No matter how she calculated it, the numbers never seemed to work out right. The job layoff had hit them like a punch to the stomach 3 months ago. David had worked construction for 8 years, steady and reliable. Then one Friday, his foreman called everyone together and explained that the company was cutting back. Last hired, first fired. David wasn't the newest guy, but he wasn't the oldest either. He fell somewhere in that dangerous middle ground where experience costs more than enthusiasm. Since then, he'd applied everywhere. Filled out applications until his hand cramped. Followed up on leads that led nowhere. Interviewed for jobs that paid half what he used to make. Maya picked up extra shifts at the nursing home where she worked, but even working 6 days a week, her paycheck barely covered their basic expenses. They'd sold David's truck first. That hurt him more than he let on, but they needed the money for rent. Then went the nice furniture they'd bought when times were better. The big screen TV, Maya's jewelry except for her wedding ring, even the good dishes, the ones they'd gotten as wedding presents 5 years ago. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Maya said, slowing down as they passed a highway patrol car. The last thing they needed was a speeding ticket. "Remember when we used to debate which restaurant to go to on Friday nights? Like our biggest problem was choosing between Italian or Mexican food?" David laughed, but it was a tired sound. "Now our biggest debate is whether we can afford the dollar menu at McDonald's." They'd planned this trip for months, saving $20 here and there. Maya had even started bringing lunch to work instead of buying it in the cafeteria. That saved her $4 a day, which added up. David had walked to his job interviews instead of driving when he could, saving gas money. Every penny counted when you were living on the edge. The hotel room for tonight was the cheapest they could find, and they'd have to share it with Maya's cousin and her kids. Not ideal, but it cut their expenses in half. Tomorrow night, after the wedding, they'd drive straight home to save on another hotel night. It meant getting home at 3 in the morning, and Maya had to work on Monday, but they'd make it work. As they drove through the Central Valley, Maya thought about Lisa's phone calls over the past few weeks. Her sister had offered to pay for their hotel, their gas, even their outfits for the wedding. Maya had said no every time, even though saying no was getting harder. Pride was expensive, but it was about all they had left that hadn't been sold or pawned. "Temperature gauge looks good," David reported, checking the dashboard. They'd had a scare last month when the car overheated in city traffic. David had learned enough about cars over the years to handle basic problems, but major repairs were out of their budget range. The landscape outside was brown and endless. Hills rolled past like waves covered in dry grass that looked ready to catch fire at any moment. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the inside of their car into an oven. Maya's clothes stuck to her back and she could see sweat beading on David's forehead. "At least it's a straight shot from here," David said, consulting the map they'd printed at the library. Their phone's GPS used data they couldn't afford to waste. Another 3 hours, maybe 4 with stops. Maya nodded, concentrating on the road. Other cars passed them regularly, newer vehicles with tinted windows and air conditioning. She tried not to feel envious. Everyone was fighting their own battles, she reminded herself. You couldn't tell what someone was going through just by looking at their car. A semi-truck thundered past, creating a gust of wind that rocked their little Honda. Maya gripped the steering wheel tighter and stayed in the right lane. No point in pushing their luck or their engine. "You know what I realized?" David said suddenly. "Even with everything that's happened, I'm still excited about this wedding. Lisa deserves to be happy." Maya reached over and squeezed his hand. This was why she'd fallen in love with him. Even when their own world was falling apart, he could still be genuinely happy for other people. That kind of heart was rare. The road stretched ahead of them, shimmering in the heat. Miles and miles of asphalt leading to a celebration they could barely afford to attend but wouldn't miss for anything. Maya pressed on, the old Honda carrying them toward whatever came next. The black Mercedes was impossible to miss. It sat on the side of the highway like an expensive mistake, hood up and steam rising from the engine. Maya spotted it first, pointing ahead as they crested a small hill. "Look at that," she said, slowing down instinctively. "Someone's having car trouble." David leaned forward to get a better view. The luxury sedan was parked on the narrow shoulder, hazard lights blinking. A man in what looked like an expensive suit stood next to it, waving his arms at the passing traffic. Car after car zoomed past without stopping. "Poor guy," Maya muttered. "In this heat too." The temperature gauge on their dashboard read 98 degrees, and that was probably conservative. Out there on the asphalt with no shade, it had to feel like standing in front of an open oven. Maya could see the man was older, maybe in his 70s, and he looked desperate. "We should stop," she said, already moving toward the shoulder. David looked at her with concern. "Maya, we're cutting it close as it is. The rehearsal dinner starts at 7, and if we stop now..." "Look at him, David. He's been standing out there who knows how long." "What if that was your grandfather?" David's grandfather had passed away 2 years ago, but Maya knew mentioning him would hit home. The old man had raised David after his parents died in a car accident. David still visited his grave every month, rain or shine. Maya was already pulling over before David could respond. She could see him struggling with the decision. They were running late, their car was unreliable, and they had barely enough gas money to get to Los Angeles. Stopping to help a stranger wasn't the smart thing to do. But Maya had never been one to choose smart over right. The Mercedes looked even more expensive up close. Maya had never seen one this nice outside of a movie. The paint job alone probably cost more than their car was worth. But right now it was just another broken-down vehicle on a hot highway. The man hurried toward them as they parked. Up close, Maya could see he was well-dressed in a way that spoke of real money. His suit looked custom-made, and his shoes were the kind David had pointed out in store windows but never dreamed of owning. But his face showed pure relief at seeing them stop. "Thank God," he said, slightly out of breath. "I've been standing here for over an hour. My phone has no signal out here." David got out and walked toward the Mercedes, already shifting into problem-solving mode. Maya followed, grabbing the water bottle from their cup holder. It was warm, but it was water. "What happened?" David asked, looking under the hood. "I honestly don't know," the man replied. "I'm Robert Williams. I was driving to my granddaughter's graduation in Los Angeles when the car just started overheating. Steam started pouring out, and I pulled over." Maya handed him the water bottle. "Here, you need to drink something. You look overheated yourself." Robert accepted the water gratefully. "You're very kind. I tried calling for roadside assistance, but like I said, no signal. I've been trying to flag down help, but everyone just drives by." David was already examining the engine. Maya could see him mentally cataloging what he saw. Years of construction work had taught him about engines, radiators, and all the things that could go wrong with vehicles. "Looks like your radiator hose burst," David said, pointing to a split in the rubber tubing. "See that? All your coolant leaked out and the engine overheated." Robert looked where David was pointing, but clearly had no idea what he was seeing. "Is it fixable?" "Temporarily, maybe," David said. If we had some water to refill the radiator and something to patch the hose. But it's not going to hold for long, especially in this heat. Maya looked at their own car, thinking about their emergency supplies. They had 2 more bottles of water in the back seat, saved for emergencies or if their own car overheated. Without air conditioning, they'd been drinking water constantly to stay hydrated. "We have more water," she said to David, reading his thoughts. Robert overheard and shook his head. "I can't ask you to give up your water. You folks have been kind enough already just stopping." "Where are you trying to get to?" Maya asked. "UCLA," Robert said. "My granddaughter is graduating from medical school today. She's the first doctor in our family, and I promised her I'd be there. The ceremony starts at 5 o'clock. Maya glanced at her watch. It was already past 2. Even if they got Robert's car running, it would be tight for all of them to reach their destinations on time. David was thinking the same thing. Maya could see the wheels turning in his head. "The nearest town is probably 15 miles back," he said. "Auto parts store, gas station, somewhere that might have what we need." "I could drive you there," Maya offered. "David could stay here with your car." Robert looked shocked. "I couldn't ask you to do that. You folks are already running late for something, aren't you? I can see your nice clothes." Maya looked down at her outfit. Nice was relative. This was her best dress, but it had come from a clearance rack 2 years ago. Still, Robert was right that they were dressed for something special. "My sister's wedding," Maya admitted, "but the rehearsal dinner isn't until 7. We have time." That wasn't exactly true. They were supposed to check into their hotel, shower, and change clothes before the dinner. Maya's hair was a disaster from the heat and wind, and David's shirt was already wrinkled and damp with sweat. But looking at Robert standing in the blazing sun, those concerns seemed trivial. David made the decision for both of them. "Let's do it," he said. "Maya, you drive Mr. Williams to find parts. I'll stay here and try to rig something temporary for the hose." Robert pulled out his wallet. "Please let me give you money for gas for your trouble." "Put that away," Maya said firmly. "We're not doing this for money." "But surely, Mr. Williams," David interrupted gently. "Sometimes people just help each other. That's all this is." Robert's eyes looked misty, and Maya wasn't sure if it was from the heat or emotion. "I don't understand. You don't even know me." "We don't need to," Maya replied. "You need help and we can give it. That's enough." As Maya walked back to their Honda to get more water for the radiator, she could hear David explaining to Robert what they'd need from the auto parts store. A new radiator hose, coolant, maybe some clamps. Basic stuff, but it would cost money they didn't really have. Maya tried not to think about that. She tried not to think about how this delay would make them even later, how they'd arrive at the rehearsal dinner looking like they'd been through a windstorm. She tried not to think about the $20 emergency fund in her purse that would probably go toward fixing a stranger's expensive car. Instead, she thought about Robert's granddaughter, somewhere in Los Angeles getting ready for her graduation, a young woman who had worked hard to become a doctor, expecting her grandfather to be there for the biggest moment of her life so far. Maya started the Honda and waited for Robert to get in. In the rearview mirror, she could see David already working under the Mercedes hood, using what little they had to try to solve someone else's problem. "Your husband is a good man," Robert said as they pulled back onto the highway. "Yes," Maya agreed, watching David grow smaller in the mirror. "He really is." The nearest town shimmered in the distance like a mirage. Maya pressed the gas pedal and hoped their generosity wouldn't cost them more than they could afford to give. The auto parts store sat in a dusty strip mall that looked like it hadn't seen better days in decades. Maya pulled into the parking lot, grateful for any shade she could find. The Honda's engine ticked as it cooled down, and she said a silent prayer that it would start again when they needed it to. Robert had been quiet during the drive, occasionally giving directions, but mostly just staring out the window. Maya could tell he was overwhelmed by their kindness, and honestly, she was starting to second-guess herself. They were now officially late for everything, and she hadn't even called Lisa to explain. "Here we are," Maya said, turning off the engine. The store was one of those places that sold everything from motor oil to fuzzy dice. A bell chimed as they walked in, and the cool air conditioning felt like stepping into heaven. Maya's skin was sticky with sweat, and her dress clung to her back uncomfortably. Behind the counter, a teenage boy looked up from his phone. "Help you folks?" Robert stepped forward. "We need a radiator hose for a 2018 Mercedes S-Class." And coolant. The kid's eyebrows went up. Mercedes, huh? That's gonna cost you. Maya felt her stomach drop. She'd been hoping for a $20 fix, maybe $30 if they were unlucky. But Mercedes parts were expensive. Everyone knew that. The boy disappeared into the back room and returned with a box. Here's your hose. It's $68 plus tax. Coolant's another $12. $85 with tax. Maya did the math in her head. They had exactly $23 in emergency cash and maybe $40 left in their checking account. Their gas tank was already below half, and they still had to drive to Los Angeles and back home. That's fine, Robert said, reaching for his wallet. Thank you so much for bringing me here, my dear. I'll cover all of this, of course. Maya was about to agree when Robert opened his wallet and his face went pale. He rifled through it frantically, checking every pocket and fold. I don't understand, he muttered. My cash was right here. $300. I counted it this morning. He turned the wallet upside down, shaking it as if money might fall out. But there was nothing except credit cards and a driver's license. Maybe you left it in your car, Maya suggested hopefully. Robert shook his head slowly. No, I had it with me. I remember taking it out to count it at the gas station about an hour before my car broke down. His face crumpled. It must have fallen out when I was waving at cars trying to get help. The wind probably scattered it across the highway. The teenager behind the counter cleared his throat. So, you still want this stuff or not? I got other customers. Maya looked around the empty store and didn't see any other customers, but she understood the kid's impatience. Robert was fumbling with his credit cards now, his hands shaking slightly. My cards, he said to Maya quietly. They're all business accounts. I need authorization codes for personal purchases, and I can't call my office without cell service. Maya stared at the radiator hose sitting on the counter. $68 plus tax. More money than they had, but not impossible if they were creative. She thought about their checking account, about the $23 in her purse. She thought about David standing in the desert heat waiting for them to return with parts. We'll take it, she said, pulling out her debit card. Maya, no, Robert protested. I can't let you do that. This is too much. It's fine, Maya lied, handing the card to the teenager. Really? But it wasn't fine, and everyone knew it. Robert could see their old car in the parking lot, could see their discount store clothes and careful budgeting. Maya watched the card reader process her payment and prayed their account wouldn't overdraw. The receipt printed out, $84.73. Maya folded it quickly and stuffed it in her purse before she could think too hard about what they just spent. Thank you, Robert said quietly as they walked back to the car. I promise I'll pay you back. I'll get your address and mail you a check as soon as I get home. Maya nodded, but she wasn't really thinking about getting paid back. She was thinking about David, probably worried sick about where they were. She was thinking about their gas gauge and whether they'd have enough fuel to make it to Los Angeles. She was thinking about Lisa's rehearsal dinner and how they were now definitely going to be late. The drive back to the highway felt longer than the drive in. Maya kept glancing at the gas gauge, watching the needle hover dangerously close to the quarter tank mark. Robert seemed lost in thought, occasionally apologizing again for the trouble they were going through. When they reached the Mercedes, David was sitting in whatever shade he could find behind their Honda. He'd removed his good shirt and was wearing just his undershirt, trying to stay cool. His face was flushed red from the heat, and Maya could see he'd been working hard. Thank God you're back, he said, standing up as they approached. I was starting to worry. Maya handed him the parts bag. Got everything you need? David looked inside and nodded. This should do it. How much did it cost? Before Maya could answer, Robert spoke up. They paid for everything. $85. I lost my cash somewhere on the highway. David's expression changed as he processed this information. Maya could see him doing the same math she'd done in the store. $85 was more than they'd spent on groceries last week. Maya, he said quietly. It's done, she replied. Let's just fix the car. David looked like he wanted to say more, but he could see Robert watching them. Instead, he got to work on the Mercedes. Maya had watched him fix things for years, but she was always impressed by how methodical he was. He drained the old coolant, removed the damaged hose, and installed the new one with the care of someone who understood that doing it right the first time was important. The heat was brutal. By the time David finished, his shirt was completely soaked with sweat, and his hands were blistered from working with hot metal. Maya had given him their last bottle of water 20 minutes ago, and she could see he was getting dehydrated. "Try starting her up," David called to Robert. The Mercedes turned over immediately and purred like the expensive machine it was. Steam no longer poured from under the hood, and the temperature gauge stayed in the normal range. "You did it," Robert exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. "It's working perfectly." David wiped his hands on his ruined shirt and nodded. "Should get you where you're going. But keep an eye on the temperature gauge. If it starts running hot again, pull over immediately." Robert grabbed David's hand and shook it vigorously. "I can't thank you enough. Both of you. You've saved my granddaughter's graduation day." As Robert gathered his belongings from the Mercedes, Maya checked her watch. It was already 5:30. The rehearsal dinner started at 7, and they still had 2 hours of driving ahead of them. There was no way they'd make it on time, and they'd arrive looking like they'd been through a hurricane. "Here," Robert said, pressing a business card into David's hand. "Please take this. I want to repay you for what you've done today. The money, your time, everything." David looked at the card briefly before putting it in his pocket. "Just glad we could help." "No, you don't understand," Robert insisted. "If you ever need anything at all, please call me." "I mean that." Maya smiled politely, but she wasn't really listening. She was calculating distances and drive times, wondering how to explain to Lisa why they'd missed the rehearsal dinner. She was thinking about their bank account and whether the check to the auto parts store would clear without overdrawing them. As Robert drove away, waving from the window of his perfectly functioning Mercedes, Maya and David stood beside their old Honda in the desert heat. They were now officially late, officially broke, and officially exhausted. "Think we did the right thing?" David asked, watching the Mercedes disappear into the distance. Maya looked at her husband, standing there in his sweat-stained undershirt with blistered hands and sunburned arms. He'd just spent their last spare money and 2 hours of their time helping a complete stranger, without expecting anything in return. "Yeah," she said, getting into the car. "I think we did exactly the right thing." 3 weeks had passed since the highway incident, and Maya was staring at another stack of bills on their kitchen table. The credit card statement showed the auto parts store charge in black and white, $84.73. It sat there among the electric bill, the rent notice, and David's unemployment paperwork like a reminder of their roadside decision. David had been looking for work every day since they got back from the wedding. He'd expanded his search beyond construction, applying for warehouse jobs, delivery driving, anything that would bring in steady income. But the job market was tough and competition was fierce for every position. "Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut about helping people," David said, tossing another rejection letter onto the table. "Seems like being nice doesn't pay the bills." Maya looked up from her own pile of paperwork. She'd been trying to pick up even more shifts at the nursing home, but there were only so many hours in a week. Her supervisor had been understanding about their situation, but she couldn't create shifts that didn't exist. "Don't say that," Maya replied. "You did the right thing." We both did, but privately she was beginning to wonder. The wedding had been beautiful, and Lisa had been radiant, but Maya and David had spent most of the reception calculating how much each glass of wine cost. They'd skipped the after-party and driven straight home to save on another hotel night. Arriving at 3 in the morning exhausted and stressed, the business card from Robert Williams sat on their refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a cactus. Maya walked past it several times a day, always noticing it but never quite ready to consider what it represented. Pride was a powerful thing, even when you couldn't afford it. "I keep thinking about what he said," David mentioned for the 3rd time that week, "about calling if we needed anything." "David, no," Maya said automatically. "We're not charity cases." "But what if it's not charity? What if he really meant it about wanting to help?" Maya had been having the same argument with herself for weeks. Every time she paid a bill or checked their dwindling bank balance, she thought about that business card. But asking for help felt like admitting defeat, like saying they couldn't handle their own problems. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Maya glanced at the caller ID and didn't recognize the number. Normally she wouldn't answer unknown calls, but lately she'd been hoping for callbacks from David's job applications. "Hello? Is this Maya? This is Robert Williams. We met on the highway a few weeks ago." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She looked at David, who was watching her curiously. "Oh, hi, Robert. How are you?" "I'm wonderful, thank you. I wanted to call and tell you that my granddaughter's graduation was absolutely perfect." She received highest honors and has been accepted into a residency program at Johns Hopkins. I wanted to thank you and David again for making it possible. That's great news, Maya said, genuinely happy for them. Congratulations to your granddaughter. Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. I've been thinking about you two constantly since that day. I hope you don't mind, but I looked up your husband's background. Construction work, right? Maya felt a mixture of surprise and concern. Yes, but how did you... I own a construction company, Robert continued. Williams Construction. We're based in Los Angeles, but we have projects all over California. I'd like to offer David a job, Maya nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? A job. Site supervisor position. Excellent benefits, competitive salary. I've been in this business for 40 years, and I've never met anyone with David's combination of skill and character. The way he worked on my car in that heat, refusing payment, putting my needs before his own schedule. That's the kind of person I want working for me. Maya sank into a kitchen chair, trying to process what she was hearing. Robert, that's incredibly generous, but we can't just accept. Why not? I need good people, and David is good people. This isn't charity, Maya, this is business. I'm offering him a job because I think he'd be valuable to my company. David had moved closer, trying to hear both sides of the conversation. Maya could see the hope starting to build in his eyes, and it scared her. Hope had been dangerous lately. Too many disappointments, too many almosts. Where would this job be located? Maya asked. Los Angeles area. I know that would mean relocating, but the company has a relocation assistance program. We'd help with moving expenses, temporary housing while you find a place, the whole package. Maya's mind was reeling. Los Angeles was expensive, but it also had opportunities. Better hospitals where she could work, career advancement possibilities they'd never have in their current small town. I don't know what to say, Maya admitted. Say you'll think about it. Say David will call me so we can discuss details. I'm flying up to San Francisco next week for a conference. I could stop by your town on the way back. Meet with both of you properly. After Maya hung up, she and David sat in their kitchen staring at each other. The business card on the refrigerator suddenly seemed to glow with possibility. Did that really just happen? David asked. I think so. He wants to offer you a job in Los Angeles. David ran his hands through his hair, a habit he'd developed during the stressful weeks of unemployment. This is crazy. Things like this don't happen to people like us. Maybe they do, Maya said quietly. Maybe sometimes they do. But even as excitement began to build between them, practical concerns crowded in. Moving to Los Angeles would be expensive. Their car probably wouldn't survive the daily commute. They'd be leaving everything familiar behind for what was essentially a promise from a stranger. What if it's not real? David voiced what they were both thinking. What if we get there and it falls through? We'd be stuck in an expensive city with no backup plan. Maya understood his concerns. They'd been disappointed too many times to believe in fairy tale endings. But she also remembered Robert's face that day on the highway, the genuine gratitude in his voice when David got his car running. What if it is real? She countered. What if this is our chance to change everything? That evening, they spread out a map of California on their kitchen table. Los Angeles looked impossibly far away, a sprawling metropolis that seemed to belong to a different world than their small town. But it was also where opportunities lived, where careers were built, where people went to start over. The salary he mentioned, David said, tracing the highways with his finger. It's more than double what I was making before. Maya nodded. She'd done the math in her head during the phone call. That kind of money would change everything. They could afford a decent apartment, reliable transportation, maybe even start saving for the future again. But what about your job here? David asked. Your family? Maya had been thinking about that too. Leaving her job would mean starting over at a new facility, proving herself all over again. And leaving Lisa, especially so soon after her wedding, felt selfish. There are nursing homes in Los Angeles too, she said finally. Probably better ones with more opportunities for advancement. They talked late into the night, weighing possibilities against risks, dreams against practical concerns. By the time they went to bed, they hadn't made a decision, but they had made progress. They'd moved from this is impossible to this might be possible. The next morning, Maya found David sitting at the kitchen table with the business card in his hand and his phone in front of him. I'm going to call him, he said. Even if nothing comes of it, I need to hear what he has to say. Maya sat down beside him and took his free hand. Okay, let's see what happens. David dialed the number and Maya held her breath as it rang. Sometimes the biggest changes in life started with the smallest actions. Sometimes you just had to be brave enough to pick up the phone. The call lasted 2 hours. Maya watched David's expressions change from nervous uncertainty to growing amazement as Robert outlined not just a job offer, but an entirely new life. When David finally hung up, he sat in stunned silence for several minutes. "Well?" Maya prompted. "It's real," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's all real. He wants to fly us down to Los Angeles next week, all expenses paid, to tour the company and meet the team. The salary is $68,000 a year, plus benefits, plus performance bonuses." Maya felt dizzy. $68,000 was more money than they'd ever dreamed of making. It was financial security, breathing room, the chance to live instead of just survive. "There's more," David continued. He said the company has housing partnerships with local apartment complexes, reduced rent for employees, good neighborhoods near the job sites. "And Maya, he asked about you too. Whether you'd be interested in a position with the company." "Me? Doing what?" "Apparently Williams Construction has been trying to implement an employee wellness program. Health screenings, stress management, workplace safety education. He wants someone with medical background to run it. He's offering you $55,000 to start." Maya sank into her chair. Together they'd be making over $100,000 a year. It was enough to not just pay bills, but to actually build a future, to save money, take vacations, maybe even buy a house someday. "What did you tell him?" "That we'd need to think about it, talk it over." He understood. "But Maya, he sounded so sincere. He kept saying how that day on the highway showed him what kind of people we are, and that's exactly what he wants in his company." The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and planning. Maya gave notice at her current job, her supervisor understanding but sorry to lose her. David researched Williams Construction online and found nothing but positive reviews and successful projects. Lisa was shocked but supportive, insisting that Maya had to take this opportunity. The flight to Los Angeles was the first time either of them had been on an airplane. Maya gripped David's hand during takeoff, both of them amazed that they were actually doing this. Robert had sent a car to pick them up, and as they drove through the sprawling city, Maya felt like she was viewing someone else's life. Williams Construction occupied a modern office building in Burbank, with large windows overlooking several active construction sites. Robert met them in the lobby, looking just as distinguished as he had that day on the highway, but more relaxed now. "Welcome to Los Angeles," he said, embracing them both warmly. "I'm so glad you decided to come." The tour was overwhelming. Maya saw offices filled with busy professionals, equipment yards with millions of dollars worth of machinery, and active job sites where workers were building everything from office complexes to affordable housing developments. This wasn't just a construction company. It was an empire. "We employ over 800 people," Robert explained as they walked through the main office, "from architects and engineers to heavy equipment operators and project managers. We're always growing, always looking for good people." David's position would involve overseeing multiple job sites, ensuring projects stayed on schedule and within budget. Maya's role would be creating and implementing health and safety programs across all company locations. Both positions came with company cars, comprehensive health insurance, and retirement plans. "The salary we discussed is just the starting point," Robert explained over lunch. "Both positions have clear advancement paths. We promote from within whenever possible." That afternoon, they toured several apartment complexes that worked with the company. The units were beautiful, modern spaces in safe neighborhoods with amenities Maya had only seen in magazines. The rent, with the company discount, was actually less than what they were paying for their tiny apartment back home. As evening approached, Robert drove them to his own home in the hills overlooking the city. It was a modest house despite his obvious wealth, comfortable and welcoming rather than ostentatious. His granddaughter Julia was there, the young woman whose graduation they'd helped make possible. "These are the angels I told you about," Robert said, introducing them. "David and Maya, meet Dr. Julia Williams." Julia hugged them both, tears in her eyes. "Grandpa has told me the story 100 times. How you stopped to help a stranger, used your own money, made yourselves late for a family wedding. I can't believe you're here." Over dinner, Robert's story came out in full. He'd started Williams Construction 40 years ago with nothing but a pickup truck and determination. He'd built it into one of the most successful companies in California, But success had made him cynical about people's motives. Everyone wanted something from him, everyone had an angle. That day on the highway changed me, he admitted. Here were two people who had every reason to drive past, to worry about their own problems. But you didn't. You stopped for a stranger and gave more than you could afford to give. It reminded me that there are still good people in the world. The job offers were even better than they'd initially discussed. Robert wanted them to be more than employees. He wanted them to be part of the company family, stock options, annual bonuses based on company performance, opportunities for continuing education and professional development. I'm 74 years old, Robert said as they sat on his patio overlooking the twinkling lights of Los Angeles. I'm starting to think about retirement, about who will carry on what I've built. I need people I can trust, people who share my values. That's you. Maya and David exchanged glances. This was beyond anything they'd imagined when they stopped to help a stranded motorist. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an invitation to completely transform their lives. When would you need an answer? David asked. Take your time, Robert replied. But I hope you'll say yes. I think you belong here. The flight home gave them time to process everything they'd seen and heard. As their small town came into view, it looked different somehow. Smaller, more limited. Not bad, but not enough anymore. Are we really going to do this? Maya asked as they drove home from the airport. I think we are, David replied. I think this is our chance. 6 months later, Maya stood in the office of Williams Construction's new wellness center, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. Her programs had reduced workplace injuries by 30% and employee sick days by half. David had been promoted to regional supervisor, overseeing projects across 3 counties. They lived in a bright apartment with a pool and a view of the mountains. They had reliable cars, money in savings, and plans for the future that didn't involve choosing between groceries and gas money. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was the reminder that kindness matters, that sometimes doing the right thing leads to extraordinary rewards, not because you expect anything in return, but because the universe has a way of surprising people who surprise it with their generosity. Robert had become like family to them, a grandfather figure who never tired of telling the story of their highway meeting. He'd paid off their student loans as a wedding gift when they renewed their vows on their 5th anniversary, insisting that people who stopped for strangers deserved to start fresh. Do you ever regret it? David asked one evening as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset. Stopping that day? Never, Maya replied. Best $85 we ever spent. They'd learned that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Sometimes helping a stranger changes your own life in ways you never could have imagined. And sometimes when you give more than you can afford, life finds a way to give back even more than you can dream.